here we are, the second installment with Jason Solomon. We're going to go through the spreadsheets. I couldn't be more excited. Welcome, Jason. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So should we
So
dive
as
right
you
in?
share your screen, what's like a little bit, let's dive right in. But what's the background of this? And then what are we looking at?
So um, I guess before I hit share, I'll just say that like many people who practice, reached a point in my career where I felt like maybe I'm not being as efficient as I could be with my time. Maybe I'm not covering all my bases. Maybe it's difficult to manage all of the things that need to be managed. When we get older and we do more playing, and if you have, if you're teaching, if you have a family, if there's a lot of other obligations in your life, there's a lot of moments where you might be sneaking in 10 minutes here or 20 minutes there. And it's important. I found it was important to find some way to keep track. So I started with a practice journal. A lot of people go toward a practice journal in that scenario, which is great. But I realized I was writing the same things and I would have to flip back 20 pages to see what the trends were. And it just made more sense to start going digital and take advantage of some kind of online platforms. Now, there are several apps that do practice journaling and logging for people. That's fine. I'm
Have
more
you
of a
tried
data driven.
Modacity, by the way?
I haven't tried Modacity. I think I got into Microsoft Excel before Modacity existed,
Oh,
and
okay.
here we are. So one of these days I may try it,
Yeah.
just to see. But sometimes when you're
Your
so
system's
far
probably
in,
more robust. Yeah.
well, who
Yeah.
knows? But we'll dive in and we'll see. So I just got to the point where I felt like I was able to get it done more effectively, more efficiently, with some Excel spreadsheeting. So this is my practice log. And there are many others like it, but this one is
Yeah.
mine. So what I do is I I I have a bunch of blocks here which represent units of time. Each block is a unit, and that is roughly 15 to 20 minutes. Now, it changes sometimes. Like if you get bogged down, if something's a little challenging, if your face is a little stubborn one day and it just takes you a little longer to get through whatever, you might find that what you thought was only going to take you 15, 20 minutes, it took you 22, 23 minutes. I don't care. Like I don't keep track of it to that level. I count the units as opposed to counting the time that has elapsed. I think sometimes when we're
Yep.
younger and we're working our way up, we care more about the quantity and less about what we're actually getting done. And so I just count units of practice because that means I got this thing done, right? That means I made progress on this thing. So every day is like a vertical column. So this is everything I did on, for example, Friday, December 6th.
Yep.
And so there's a couple things that can happen. First thing that can happen is if I zoom way out, I can start seeing trends of when I might be getting more or less practice. And so there are times in, my life where if I get really busy, so for example, like this day, I don't know what was going on with that day, but I was either sick or traveling. That's for me, that tends to be what kind of keeps it, July 1st, that's probably a drum corps thing. That was probably a real sticky day where I was teaching drum corps or I was traveling, to or from because I do that a lot in the summer. But so it's just a way for me to kind of keep track. Now, what I do is anytime, and this is going to get a little into the weeds of formulas for Excel. So for people who haven't done formulas on Excel, there's all sorts of ways that you can get it to program things and keep track of data. So um, each block is a cell, right? And I've highlighted these cells right here to make my unit. Anytime there's data that's put in the upper left corner, then that will register like a non-zero. That registers a one. So over the course
Yep.
of the day, it will calculate how many units
Yep.
I've done. So what I
Yep.
can do if I want to is so then if I like using like shift and cursor. So if I shift and start moving to the left, you can see down at the bottom of the screen that it starts counting up the number of units. So
Yep.
it says 5, meaning I've got 5 blocks highlighted and I did what, 33 units, I averaged 6.6. So if I want to take a 100-day average, I can literally just, excuse me, 60, 70, 80, 90. So for these 100 days, I got what,
Beautiful.
664 units. I average 6.64 units a day. Now that's fine. But what I can do is it makes it super easy for me to start comparing different times, different seasons, different years, different semesters, and and I do this with my students. They all have a shared Excel spreadsheet document through we use OneDrive at our university. And so they all have their own practice log that I have access to so I can make suggestions or we can pull it up in their lessons. And it's amazing the number of times where a student will come into the room and they'll be like, man, I just don't feel like I'm playing well right now. Things just aren't settling. And I'll be like, well, let's go look at the data. Let's look at your 3-week average. This is what you averaged this week.
Hmm.
This is what you averaged the week before. This is what you averaged. So, we can see when there's a trend of saying, oh yeah, I've had a lot of observations this week for my music ed classes, so I haven't gotten as many units. And I guess I didn't think about that because I'm still just as busy. And so it's a really easy way to just take a look at what your trends are, which might answer a lot of questions. Um, if your flexibility is not improving at the rate of other things, and then you go back and you look at your practice log and you say, oh yeah, that's the last unit of my typical day, and I don't always get to my last unit, therefore I've only done it X number of times. Well, it would make sense that it's not developing as much as some other things. And so I think that there's ways to be data driven with understanding how our progress is going. And so this is very longitudinal, but for me, I feel like it's been real help. Now, I tend to do a lot of copying and pasting. So there's a lot of times where, for example, here it says free buzzing. So as you know, I'm a big fan of facial stability training. I've got this whole method that I've created for how to develop the strength, the endurance, the coordination of the facial muscles so that we can play the range of the instrument and have control. I do that. My workouts are rather demanding. So this day is a stability day. That workout takes me about 19 minutes. Like from start to stop, my workouts take me 19 minutes, and I do them every other day
19
because it's
minutes of free buzzing.
no 30 minutes of free buzzing, but on the stability days, the stability workout is 19 minutes. But it's very
Whew.
demanding, so I only do it every other day. On non-stability days, I do a 30-minute thing where there's a drone that plays and then I buzz like up a 12th, and then the drone plays and I buzz up a 12th, and then it kind of keeps going up by half steps. So I'm only buzzing like 15%, sorry, 50% of the time, but it takes 30 minutes to do. So I call it a double shot of free buzzing. So that's my non-stability day double shot of free buzzing. Now this largely is just copied and pasted from the days before. So for example, what's today? The second? Yeah. I've already done my free buzzing today. So I'm just going to take this and pop it over there because I already did it, right? And then that will give me credit for the 2 units that I did because it takes about that much. I count it as a double. And then the next thing I'm going to do is going to be this interval thing I do. Now, for intervals, I got a lot of tabs down here, which you can probably see. And what I like to do is I try to come up with a repertoire of exercises that will kind of go after a certain component of my technique. And then I rotate through those in some kind of organized, coordinated manner. So when we go to the intervals tab, and intervals, if you imagine, so over here, this is kind of explaining intervals. So major seconds, now a major second is 2 half steps for basic music theory. Most people know that, but if you're going from C to D, that's a major second, and it's the distance of 2 half steps, like on a piano or whatever. The number of intervals means that if I do 3 major seconds, so if I play C to D to E, that means that I'm covering a total of 4 half steps, and that's a total range of a major third that would happen on a single breath. So if you do that over the range of your instrument, you just go up by half steps, you go down by half steps, you can cover your range playing major seconds times 3. But what I wanted to do was I find it helpful to
Jason,
keep
hang on,
track
hang
of.
on, hang on, hang on.
Yeah.
This may be my ADD brain, but that was a lot of information. I need a breath every
Oh,
now and then. I'm sorry to just whew,
no
that was
worries.
a lot of information. That was good. That was
No.
good. But just for
Oh,
me
and,
and
and
for anybody watching this that says ADD and as like wants to really understand what you're sharing.
that's all right. You
Okay,
can
so
pull the
we've
reins on my OCD whenever you need, like not offended at all.
okay,
So
but the summary of what I've got so far is that um you're covering the full range with different intervals interleaved over different days.
yes. And what
Great.
I started to do was once certain patterns, so for example, right here, major thirds times 3, That, so let's say C up to E and then E up to A flat or G sharp, however you want to think about it.
Okay.
That covers the total range of a minor sixth on a single breath. And so I do
Yep.
various things where that's all, covered. As I go down this chart, you'll notice that the total interval, the total amount that you're covering on a single breath gets greater and greater because the intervals get bigger, the number of them that I'm doing get bigger and bigger. And at this point, these are the intervals that I'm rotating through. So
Mm.
major sixths times 5 covers 3 octaves of range. And so to try to slur up that and slur down that on a single breath and make it all smooth and beautiful, that's, I think, a worthwhile thing to do. And then I might take that all up a half step and then all up a half step and all up a half step. And I basically cover the full, what I'm calling my full functional range through these intervals. So what I've done is I've taken these particular intervals and I do one of them per day. So I've got day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way up to day 12. And over
Mm-hmm.
here, this block represents what's going to go in my practice log as like a skeletal like placeholder. So if I want to add notes to it on how it goes on a certain day, I can do that. But today, so let's see, yesterday I did the day 2 interval. So here's that block. So if you go over to the intervals, boom, I did day 2 intervals. Happens to, so I'm covering, this is the range I'm covering total on my instrument. And then it happens to be major sixths, and I do 6 of them stacked on top of one another, which is 3 octaves plus a major sixth. So that's a large range that you're covering on a single breath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't need to take it and modulate it that many half steps because it's already
Right.
covering such a big amount of the range. So on days where the interval pattern is a little smaller, I've got to do more half steps worth of it to cover my total range. So that kind of affects how many times I might repeat it because it's going to take me about 15, 20 minutes. So yesterday was day 2. So that means the next thing I'm going to practice is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to grab day 3. I'm going to copy it, go over to my main sheet, and then boom, I'm going to paste it. So without having to take any bandwidth, it's already been decided that that's what I'm going to practice for my intervals today. And I might go 3 or 4 months just rotating through this pattern. It's 12-day rotation. Tomorrow's day 4, the next is day 5, because I've already determined that this is a really nice, organized, and diversified way to cover the range of my instrument, to keep learning my intervallic patterns, because that shows up in the repertoire all the time, whether we see them or not. And so it's a really great way for me to kind of have diversification, but also consistency of concept, but variety of specific content. So let's
Cool.
say, yeah,
How do you work in progress with this? So I understand there's a large element of maintenance here, but I'm thinking about, for example, progress in intonation, progress in quality of slur, quality of sound. Are you repeating the intervals? If you have a snag, are you doing 3 to 4 reps? Like, how are you making improvement to your product?
great questions. So for me in this particular exercise, um, I repeat each interval several times. So I might do so let's say, all right, so today's day 3, major sevenths times 5, that covers 3 octaves plus or minus 6 on a single breath. I'm going to start it down on E flat 1, which is my pedal E flat. So
Mm-hmm.
the first version is going to be E flat 1, which will go up to D2, which will go up to D flat 3, which will go up to what? C4, which will go up to B4, right? So it'll
Yeah.
go from E flat 1 up to B4. And what I'll do is I'll start at the bottom and I'll go and then I do a couple of articulations on the top and then I slur my way back down and it usually sounds like trash. It's hot
Wait, you're
garbage.
going that fast? Boo-da-da-da-da-da, like
No,
that?
no, no. I do it's 105 beats per minute and I do eighth note pulse. So
Oh,
Scooby Dooby Dooby, somewhere around there. It
that's
usually
still pretty
sounds awful.
fast to cover. Yeah.
It
Yeah. Okay.
is.
Yeah. Right. It
And,
sounds like
and
crap.
so
Okay. Yeah. Makes
it
sense.
sounds like crap. And what I'm doing is I'm going to do it like 8 or 9 times. And through the repetition of doing it 8 or 9 times, it starts to sound better and better. So,
Yeah.
full disclosure, some of this is me just working through and kind of getting ready and just getting to it. I think there's something to be said for just saying, Sometimes when we show up to a gig, whether our face is feeling cozy or not, you got to play what's on that page. So you got to just trudge through it sometimes. And so for me, this is one of those moments where it's almost more of a meditative practice where I know I'm going to do it a bunch of times. It's going to start not great and it's going to get better as I go. I have a drone running and a metronome running. And so the pitch, all there's, there might be pitch
Okay.
issues, but I'm always kind of working toward bettering the pitch and bettering the time
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
bettering the cleanliness of the slur and the articulation, all that stuff. And when I get to the 8 or 9, reps of it, it's definitely better. And then I'll move it up a half step. And then I'll do the same process. And then I'll move it up a half step and do the same process. For me to cover my entire range, it's going to take me about 15 minutes, maybe 20, maybe 17. It depends on the day. Some days things feel great. Some days things feel awful. So it's in that zone. Now, over time, I used to do like these 12. Let's say I used to do these. So they're not quite as big, not quite as pyrotechnic. But what happened was, as the
Hmm.
months, as the weeks and months go on, I start saying, you know what, minor thirds times 5, it's too easy. It doesn't really, like, it's too
Yeah.
easy. Like, I'm fine on it. So then
Yeah.
what I do is I just shift everything down on the chart. So one of these days, I'm going to say that these two patterns, which, only cover 3 octaves, are just a little too easy. Like, they just sound good out of the gate. I'm fine. So then what I'll do is I'll highlight these two in exchange.
Hmm.
So I'll give you an example of how I would do that. So I highlight those two, then I unhighlight these two.
Yeah.
And this is time that I'm not practicing. This is time I'm preparing my chart for the events, right? So then this becomes my 12-day rotation. And I figure out a
Yep.
good order, whatever, and then I slide everything down. I'm gonna undo what I just did just so you can see. But so then I redo the blocks over here and make sure these are all accurate. I'm so when it starts to sound too good, I make it harder. And that's kind of the way that I practice my technique. I think that there are, and I think I talked about this in our podcast interview, but I consider 4 levels of success. The basic entry level is survival. I think a higher level of success is competence. I think a higher level of success from that is proficiency. And I think the highest level of success is mastery.
Yeah.
When I'm working my technique, I'm going from pre-survival to survival. Once
Yep.
I'm surviving it, make it harder and start figuring out things that I cannot yet survive. And then the goal is to get to the point to where I'm surviving those. And what I have found over the years is that when I make kind of like the gateway is down by survival, make it harder, make it harder, make it harder, make it harder. Then,
Okay, so you said survival, competence,
and then proficiency and mastery.
proficiency, and mastery.
Yeah.
And
Now
so
those
once
are
something gets out of survival into competence, then you start getting things that need to be into the survival thing again. You
I
don't
go
go
find
from,
other things that I cannot yet survive and I work
yeah.
towards surviving them. Yeah.
And that inevitably, does that push the thing then that's at competence up into mastery?
It absolutely does. Because if I were to go back to these intervals, for example,
Yeah.
they're probably at mastery level because they're super easy by comparison to the things that I'm doing now.
And
I think
you left them when they were in competence.
I left them when they were. I'm like, you're competent. You're on the
Cool.
train.
Yeah.
You'll continue your journey up the mountain. I think that sometimes a lot of young practicers get so wrapped up with making
Yeah.
it like perfectly reaching mastery level that they just don't cover the breadth of stuff that they really should be covering.
Wow, a light bulb just went off for me, which is that I actually am already doing this in my school. And like I
Mhm.
push people, there's a certain progression of techniques to unlock the high range on horn, the way that I teach it. And they're trying to get technique one, they're trying to get it to mastery. And I'm like, no, you should do technique. You got technique one. Okay. Like let's do
Right.
technique two. And that's going to move technique one better. Like, don't worry
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
all the time.
Technique one will continue to improve on its own just through
Yeah.
osmosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think double tongue, I got a lot with drum corps, there's a lot of double tonguing has become kind of the big thing. A lot of the repertoire demands of the top corps include a lot of double tonguing now.
Huh.
I marched in the 90s and that was not a thing.
Right.
But now the visual demands are much more significant and the double tonguing demands are more significant.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of people that are practicing their double tonguing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm amazed at the number of people that are like, oh, I played it and it didn't really sound great, so I'm going to slow it down. And I'm like, no, 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 go the other way. Like, it's fine. It's reasonably in place. We need to figure out what your maximal survival capabilities are. And then we need to keep pushing that envelope because there's going to be more, the improvement I think will come more quickly when you're pushing your survival envelope rather than pushing your mastery envelope. Mastery is a byproduct of the work we do to just cover more things in survival. Like that's what I have found. There's probably a slicker way of saying that, but that's basically what I've kind of come to with my technique anyway.
Hmm.
Um, so this, to end that chapter, this is intervals, happens to be a thing I do, covers the range. I am also covering some what I call harmonic fluency, understanding the patterns that you're going to see in music. I don't have to practice my diminished arpeggios because I do stacked minor thirds. So that's just kind of part of it, right? When I start playing Hindemith, I don't have to worry about the perfect fourths, that leap all over the place because I do fourths regularly. So there's
Yeah.
that. And I get that everybody's a little different. I had to delete it because I haven't done it yet, so I'll put it back in
That's
later.
right. It's very, very important. We don't want to mess up
Don't want to lie. So
the.
so intervals, that's one thing I do, and I consider that to be some agility and some fluency and some work and all that. So the next thing I
Cool.
do, so now here's a chapter, here's a unit on agility, right? So and I know I talked about this before, but I think for me there's like four pillars of technique. There's stability, and that's our ability to just play clear, full sounds, stable and unwavering all over the range of the instrument. A lot of that comes down to range and just control, right? There's agility, which is our ability to move between the notes. So a lot of people think of lip slurs or think of leapy
Yeah.
passages and whatnot. So
Yep.
I think stability and agility are kind of like a yin and a yang in terms of their relation. Then
Mm.
I think clarity is our ability to start sounds, connect sounds, and stop sounds. So
Yeah.
attacks, releases, legato, that kind of stuff. And then
Yep.
fluency is just understanding the patterns. So my technical units are all focused on stability, agility, clarity, and fluency. So here's an agility unit. It's highly agile. It's like 95% agility. So with agility, what I've done is I said, okay, what are the things I need to be doing? And how many days will it take for me to rotate between those things and then come up with a rotation? So you'll notice yesterday was agility day 22. And here's my
Hmm.
agility page. So one of the things that I do is I do lip slur patterns. And every day you'll notice this one says level 1.8, slur
Yeah. What's
7V.
that?
So that means something to me. I realize this is going to get jargon heavy real quick. So I
Yeah.
apologize if people need to pause and, rewatch or whatever. But I've created a bunch of different lip slur pages. Let me pull up some. So this is a little level one technique packet that I made for my students
Uh.
at Troy. And in it, I talk about how we can take the overtone series and just translate it to numbers because then we don't have to read music. We're just
Yep.
doing the shelves of the overtone series.
Beautiful. Hmm.
From there, I have all these different patterns. So for me, and I know like the plight of the horn is that the number of overtone shelves that you're working with and the number of overtone shelves I'm working with, it's a lot easier for me to do this on a trombone than it is for you to do something like this on the horn.
Brah.
But
Yeah.
you know, sorry about you. But
I'm going up to the 24th harmonic, man. Come on.
yeah, you'd have to do like alphanumeric coding. Like you'd have like shelf H, and so for me it's
Oh
just two, three, four,
yeah.
five. For me it's just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. But
That's a
and
great idea, actually.
yeah, and I don't really do seven because I very rarely will sit on this. Now, obviously on a trombone we can play like G4 and G flat 4 with sharped positions, but for the purposes of lip
Huh.
slurs, keep it simple. Asterisk.
Wow.
I just do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8.
Huh.
Um,
Cool.
this is a level one packet, so it's the packet like you walk in first day. Here you go. So this is just 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is just second partial, third partial, fourth partial, and fifth partial. And these are different lip slur passages. So that's a lip slur. That's a lip slur. That's a lip slur.
Yep.
That's a lip slur. And with my students, they have to learn these 32 different patterns, just do one a day or two a day. And then over the course of a couple of weeks, they get better at the patterns and they have to do them at certain tempos to level up to level two. And it's all kind of gamified for them. But really what we're doing is we're just diversifying the lip slurs that we do every day. I
Yeah.
One of the things that I don't want to do is I don't want to do like the same four lip slurs and get really, really good at those four lip slurs, but have it not necessarily transfer to just having flexibility and agility all over the instrument because I've learned certain patterns really well. You know,
Beautiful.
in basketball, the analogy would be free throws. Some people are really good at free throws, but then if they had to make a shot that is the same distance from the hoop, but it's somewhere else on the court,
Yeah.
their percentage goes down because
Yep.
they practice free throws a lot and they don't practice shots from all over the
Yeah, we
court.
want resilience and variety, not just over
Absolutely.
specificity. Hmm.
Right. So if a student of mine does this pattern on Monday, and then they do this pattern on Tuesday, and this pattern on Wednesday, and this pattern on Thursday, they're covering a similar level of difficulty,
Yeah.
but it's slightly different patterns every day.
Yep.
So what I do at this point is I treat this as this is a horizontal line, and I'll play that whole pattern as a lip slur. And
Yep.
for me, that's 1H. And then this is 2H. And this is 3H. I'm at the point where I'm just stringing them all together like the popcorn on the tree, right? And
Hmm.
then, so 1V would be these four patterns, which is more of a vertical relationship. So I'll go two, three,
So
two,
H
three,
and
four,
V,
five.
got it.
Yeah, and so it's H and V. So if you look at my practice log, 1.8, and then I do 7V plus 8V. So that would mean I pull up this sheet and I'm doing from here all the way down to here. So I'm going 5 4 3 2 3 4 3 4 3 4 5 4 3 2 3 2 3 2 3 4 5 4 all, and then down 8V. That's one continuous slur on a breath.
Are you open to a challenge, Jason?
Maybe.
I challenge you to play this entire thing, circular breathing, before you die.
I keep adding as I get more efficient. So a challenge accepted, but not today. But what I do is so that's the first line. So the first line is just a different sheet and it's a different slur and it's a different combo. So look, this one's level
Got it.
2.7, 7V, 8V.
Ah,
So
it's
that means
quite a lot. Yeah.
it is. So that means I pull up my 2.7 because these are
Yeah.
seven tuplets. There's only seven notes. And I'm going to do 7V, 8V. So it's going to be, so here's my pattern. It's this stuff right here. It's, well, these, not these over here, but, um, and at first it might sound a little rough. It takes a couple of goes. I might end up spending 1 to 2 minutes just getting it on the open instrument. And then once I
Yep.
got it, I take it all the way down the valves or slides and all the way back up. And that might take me 5, 6, 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, then I do a lot of isolations. And when I say isolations, I'm toggling between two shelves. That's all it is. Like a lip trill, but since I'm a trombonist, it's all slower, so I don't call it a lip trill.
Okay.
But I have this handy dandy chart over here.
I
These
see. I see.
these are isolations. These are the partials.
Hmm.
So if I'm going between the fifth and sixth partial, and then here it says 25%, 50%, 75%. For me, that's where I take a measure of 4/4, which has 4 beats in it. And I'm just, how many beats am I doing the 16th notes over? So 25% means I'm only doing 1 beat of 16th notes. Scooby Dooby Doo, Scooby Dooby Doo. 2 beats would be 50%. Scooby Dooby 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 Doo,
Got
Scooby
it.
Dooby 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 Doo. And then obviously 75 would be 3 beats. I don't do 100 because then there's no place to breathe.
Hmm.
And what I find is that the tempos over here, which auto-fill these blocks, I don't enter these numbers. What I do is I take it, this gets copied, pasted. When this gets pasted and these numbers change, they auto-populate over here. So if
Yep.
you look at, for example, right here, this is the fourth to fifth partial. That's, for me, that's a B flat up to a D. That's just two adjacent notes in the overtone series. But notice that my 25% tempo is 155. My 50%
Hmm.
tempo is down to 140, and then my 75% tempo is down to 120. And that makes sense because if you're doing more iterations of the slur, you're not going to be able to go as fast, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then over time, 6 months from now, whatever, I can look back at this chart and I can start saying, oh, so for example, this one right here, so what must have happened here is I more recently did the 50% version and I bumped up the tempo because it was going well, which means the next time that I do the 25% version, this tempo is
I
probably going
see.
to go up to like 120. And so sometimes I can start but I can start looking at trends, and I do this with my students because we have like a smaller version for them because they don't do 5 tuplets. And they don't do 6 tuplets. They're just doing the 16th note versions for now, because that's, that's enough for a basic level. But we can start looking at trends and we can start saying, okay, these partials, oops, sorry, these partials are all producing relatively similar results. Or I guess you could say these two partials are producing relatively similar results. And then these two partials are producing relatively similar results. But you can start seeing where the patterns change, and where people start
Yeah.
running into, what if the 25 and the 50% are reasonably similar, but the 75%, there's a big drop off. That's a certain trend, whereas other players, the 50 and the 75% might be similar, but the 25% might be significantly faster. I think that's a difference between speed and endurance. And so if I start seeing with myself or my students that there is a disproportionate level between speed or endurance, as demonstrated by the
Right.
numbers,
Then you address the weak link.
then I can make adjustments and
Yeah.
I can say,
Yeah.
okay, let's add a little bit of time to work on this aspect. So every day, so it's a 60-day rotation,
Wow.
which sounds like a lot, but really it doesn't. Like, you can have a 300-day rotation, whatever. You just do the next day.
Yep.
And so again, it's like meal prep. It's like I don't have to think about it. So yesterday was agility day 22. Today's going to be agility day 23. So I'm going to go down to the 23. And I'm going to say, cool, I'm going to do my level 3.6 slur. I happen to do 3H plus one extra because I can't do, that's the number I can do on the breath. And then I'm going to do these three particular isolations. And I'm going to try to bump the tempos up a little bit. And then I'll copy it and then I'll paste it. And then those will auto populate where they need to on this chart. So this chart is just a way to kind of keep track. And what I did was I took a snapshot on November 1st, 2024 of what this chart looked like. So these were the tempos that
Oh,
I
cool.
had on November 1st. So then 6 months later, I might take another snapshot and look at it, and then that
Yeah.
might make me feel good because it's like the numbers are better. So it's all about this concept of coming up with like your meals and then rotating through your meals. And I do that with stability, I do that with agility, I do that with clarity, I do that with
So let's
fluency.
talk about clarity because
Yeah.
that's very interesting to me. How do you
So
practice clarity?
So a couple of lately, what I've been doing, I've kind of been double dipping with some videos that I post for the Madison Scouts. That's the drum corps I work for right now. It's the only drum corps I've worked for, and it's been a great time. I really enjoy working with them. They have, what is it called? Slack. They have a Slack page. That's what it's
Yeah.
called. And so it's a vibrant practice community. It's basically like a music studio where they're posting practice videos every day, and people are sharing what they're working on, and people are commenting, and I try to get on there and give people suggestions. So double tonguing is a big thing. So lately I've been doing a lot of double tonguing with, various, patterns, and you can see it's all coded. Like this is all coded here. And so that's what I've been doing lately. But I will say that I'm also in the process of writing like a 300-day rotation for clarity. It's not yet written, so I can't roll it out. But what I can show you is these are some of the types of things I do. So for clarity, I can do single tonguing, double tonguing, and triple tonguing. And again, I can utilize that 25, 50, and 75% of the measure, because for you to go daga daga da, rest,
Yeah.
rest, daga daga da is different than going
Sure.
daga 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 da, daga 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 da.
Yep.
So it's going to have some multiple tonguing. For me, there's a legato slide accuracy component, and that's just coordinating the movement of the slide with my legato articulation. That's a hard thing to do on a trombone, and so I've got different patterns of legato slide accuracy, and so I'm basically gonna, it's like this is my pile of pepperoni, and these are my sandwiches, and each sandwich is I'm gonna throw a little piece of pepperoni on each sandwich, as I make my daily sandwiches. And then down here, where is it? Let me find it here. It's buried in the middle. I gotta find it. Yeah, this stuff. So here, this is basically every note of my range, and then single, double, or triple tonguing, 25%, 50%, or 75%. So if you do one of those a day or two of those a day, it's going to cover it's going to take many days to do them all, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what I'll probably do is I'll probably do 4 or 5 of these a day, but I want to not randomize. I want to pick divert. I'd like do a low one, do a middle one, do a high one, do one that's on 75%, do one that's on 25%, do a single, do a double, do a triple, like every day, so that there's some balance of nutrients being covered on a daily basis. But then
Uh-huh.
they get rotated through each day. So I'm hopeful that in the next 2 weeks I will have my clarity units all figured out, and then I can just add them to the copy paste train. I've done different things over the years, and it's kind of like, I don't know. It's like it's almost like a cell phone when they come up. They have like updates, and they'll,
Yeah.
or like computer operating systems. You'll get like the 3.6 update, and it's like the
Yeah.
3.6 update already exists, but it, if you haven't downloaded it yet, then you're still functioning on the 3.5. And then at some point
Yeah.
you're going to roll out that 3.6, and then boom, things kind of change. Um, I do think there is some aspect of me working on the next rotations and kind of getting those going, and planning them out. And then when they're ready, I implement them. So my mental game, like what I'm doing in terms of my practice for mentally, um, I am mentally focused on things that I'm not yet doing in the practice room because they're not all planned out the way I want them to be planned out yet. When I sort that out, I then put them into practice. And so sometimes that's frustrating because you'll get a really great idea and you'll be like, "Oh man, I got to do this and I can't wait to do that. Let me see how I can kind of like make a little plan to do it." And so I
Mm.
know it's coming, but it's not in there yet because I haven't like sorted it out. I want to make sure it's sorted before I start, because otherwise I'm just randomly just doing things in the room. And I get that some people might need that spice of variety to just say, you know what, this is unplanned. I'm just going to practice this. Cool. Let me just go through this. I think that's fine. I think for me and my personality, which is more on the OCD side, I can very quickly get bogged down in an unproductive way by either staying too
Mm.
long on something in a session, or doing it for 3 weeks every day and not even picking my head up out of the sand saying, oh, should I be doing other things too? So I have to
Right.
be very careful that I stay organized, because I've found over the years that that has yielded superior results. So it's a lot of single tonguing, it's a lot of double tonguing, it's a lot of triple tonguing, it's a lot of legato. Frankly, I don't practice the releases as much, but I imagine if you talk to me 6 months or a year from now, I might be at the point where I start to hear that that is a lagging thing in my playing. And so I have to come up with a way to do that. So I got to come up with some kind of rotational plan and then get it into that practice log. As of
Where
now,
my mind is, sorry to interrupt, where my mind is
no,
going is that um you have parameterized clarity around the speed of repeated notes. And a lot of the clarity issues that I see with people is just that the beginning of their notes, it's like the onset time sucks or the onset quality sucks. Like I've got a student
right,
right now that's really struggles just to like start a note clean. Once he's started it, he can re-articulate it, but it's that first
right.
note that's the problem. And that, I don't know if it's like a horn player thing or what, but I'm curious. It's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but have you thought about parameterizing that, or would that be stability? Is that a downstream effect of a stability issue? You know?
I think it's a downstream effect of stability and internal audiation a lot of the times. Um, if that if that was an emergent aspect of my deficiencies, you would see my practice log reflect that. For me,
Yeah.
I think that the speed of the time, like getting really clear in the faster limits and figuring out what those faster limits are, that yields downstream results in areas like just starting a note cleanly.
Yeah.
Because you know as well as I know, if you're playing a 30-second note or you're playing a whole note, in theory, the mechanism of articulating that note should be the same. The only difference
Yeah.
is the sustain that follows. So one way that you can kind of environmentally constrain yourself to focus on just having that real immediacy of sound is to make the tempo such that
Yeah.
that's the only way you're going to survive the pattern. So going faster, in other words. So it's
Makes
not that I'm
sense.
necessarily obsessed with the speed. It's that I think if I get cleaner on the fast stuff, when I then have to do those just basic on like starting the whole note beautifully, that seems to be pretty well taken care of as a byproduct.
Hmm.
So,
Cool.
so you're right. It's a good observation. I do tend to focus on the speed aspect, not because I'm going to try to out-articulate people in a speed contest, but more because I think we want all of our articulations to be just quick and beautiful and easy, right? And so that
Yeah.
kind of that's the whole survival thing where it's like if I can survive 144 beats a minute, I really need to try to get 148 beats a minute under my belt.
Yeah.
And in so doing, the articulation on that whole note is like 3 milliseconds cleaner, or whatever. So
Yeah. What's this 100 days tab?
100 days. Oh, so as you know, I'm on Instagram and I do like these 100-day challenges. I have some friends in the professional community that that let's just say they get a kick out of people who get on there to do a 100-day challenge, and then on like day 7 they're like, all right, I needed a rest day, so I read a book and like that was my practice today. And they're real hardcore. They're like, that doesn't count as practice, it's got to be 100 days. And so I obsess, like I practice every day, and I've got some scar tissue in my face and I've got some inefficiencies, and I have found that when I take days off, the repercussions of that are significant, and perhaps more so than a lot of other people that are, maybe in the professional community with me. um, so every 100 days I do a new like 100-day challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, I'm all in on arpeggios. I'm
I
doing
see.
different arpeggios. And if I go to my 100-day tab, it's just kind of all these different things that I've done. So I did, arpeggios, I did whole tone patterns for 100 days, I did chromatic patterns for 100 days, octatonic scales, I did that for 100 days. I did Clark 2. I came up with 100 variations of the Clark 2 exercise, and I did one a day for 100 days, just different things. And so this is just a way for me to keep track of what I've done.
I
And
see.
also, you can definitely get lost, in the weeds. So, yeah, like this, I think this was Clark. Yeah, this is all Clark. So on day 40, I played 1 3 2 1 2 3 4 2 3 5 4 3. So I inverted because it's either do re mi do or do mi re do. It's a slightly different pattern. Is the big leap on the beginning or is the big leap on the end? 1 3 2 1, the big leaps in the front.
Mm,
1 2 3 1,
mm.
the big leaps in the end. And so I treated this as like an A and a B, and then sometimes I descended 1 7 6 1 or 1 6 7 1. So you can either go up or go down in the micro pattern, and you could put the big leap at the front and the
Uh-huh.
big leap at the
Uh-huh.
end. So now
Uh-huh.
you've got a 2 by 2 grid to where you could do all sorts of varieties and variations of that. And so I just came up with 100 days worth of, variations. Right now, I happen to be on right here. This is where I'm at. So these are my arpeggios. And again, it's all coded just so that it's just abbreviations so that it fits nicely in the chart. I know what they mean. Nobody
Yeah.
else really needs to, but it makes sense to me. So on this day, I was doing ascending 3 note pattern, starting on the root, and then the pattern itself. I'm sorry, A doesn't mean ascending. A means arpeggio, because I've also got other like scales and thirds patterns and other patterns that I kind of have the same coding with. So arpeggio 3 notes starting on the root. This is a descending pattern, and then it's a 1 5 1, so it'll go into the dominant chord, and when it does, it resolves down to the next note in the dominant, and then I'm gonna go all around the circle of force on the instrument. That's what the C means. M just means melodic. That doesn't that's a moot point for this particular thing. Other things I do can also be intervallic, and I can get into that later. But
See.
the next day, so if I did that on day 11, then the next day it's an arpeggio, it's 3 notes, it starts on the root, it descends. But now when I resolve to the dominant chord, I go up to the next note in the dominant 7. And then
Ascending.
instead of going around the circle of force, I'm just going up by half steps in the range of my instrument.
Cool.
Some days I descend the range of the instrument, some day I go around the circle of fourths. And so every day it's a slightly different pattern. And then
Okay.
what's
So
today?
Jason, I think
Yeah,
I think we get the picture on this. It's incredible.
cool.
What's coming alive. Unfortunately, I only have a few more minutes for this.
Yeah, no worries.
You have done a masterpiece of periodization, basically, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you've periodized, you've isolated things down into the main components of brass playing. and you've periodized it in a really sophisticated way. This is like the Taj Mahal of brass periodization.
Well, thank you.
It's beautiful. Yeah, congratulations and thank you for doing this work and for the benefit it brings. The the question that comes to mind for me, especially for folks watching this, is most people are not going to go, all right, cool, like let's set this spreadsheet up, let's go, right?
Mhm.
To that level of, I mean, mastery. So when for the average player, how do they get into this? What's the 80/20 like first few steps of stepping into this paradigm of periodizing for oneself?
Right. Great question. And to be honest, I think I started there. It's
Of
just
course.
snowballed over time. So I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting that people need to jump in right to the deep end here.
How many
Um,
years you've been at this for with this
I mean,
kind of?
I have not missed a day of practice since August of 2017. So what, seven
Yeah.
years, 8 years? And I've
Wow.
been
And how many times have you been, how long have you been working on this spreadsheet concept for?
back then it was on paper. And I realized
Mm,
quickly that it was getting too complicated for paper. But I would say that this document itself is probably from 2019, maybe
yeah,
2018. So, I mean, it's been years of just progressively getting more and more
right.
detailed. As, I mean, anybody who's played a civilization game knows that you start with like the caveman time and then you start,
Right.
smelting iron ore and you start building ships and everything. And so
It's a
things
great
just get more
analogy.
complex. They just kind of ramp up as you go. Um, but so I think the first thing you got to do is you got to say, okay, what things are important to me to develop, right? The older I get, the more I think develop my technique and then bring that to the repertoire. If I go the other way and use the repertoire to develop my technique, there might be holes or things that just aren't covered as much, or I might just be like beating this dead horse in, like I might be destroying my love for a piece of repertoire because I'm using it to get clean articulations and then I'm
Hmm,
bludgeoning it to death.
hmm,
Um, so for me, I find let's bludgeon the technique because we don't care about it. It's just a means to being able to play the repertoire. So then the next question is, okay, what technical things are important? Some people might say, well, all right, I should do long tones, I should do lip slurs, I should do articulations, I should do my scales, I should do there's a small list of maybe, 5 to 10 things that most of us are probably going to pick, right? And then it's a question of saying, okay, well, how many minutes can I devote to this or devote to that? How much time do I have over the course of my day? So, if you're a busy professional and you play music on the side and you're like, I've got 30 minutes a day. Okay, well, now you need to come up with like a 5 minute long tone thing and a 5 minute arpeggio thing and a 5 minute articulation thing and a 5 minute scale thing. And at first, you might just have a 1 day rotation of long tones. You might be like, yeah, I'm going to play these Remington long tones. That's what I'm going to do. And tomorrow it's going to be the same. But as you go, couple of weeks, couple of months, you might start saying, I wonder if there's like another way I could do like the same kind of a thing. So what if I do like a version where I ascend and then maybe there's a B day where I do a descending version and then you have an A day and a B day, and then you're like, okay, I did this on Monday, I'll do this on Tuesday. And then that might last you for months, maybe even years, but at some point you might say, there's this other way I've been thinking about doing it. So I feel like sometimes this kind of repetition, this concept repetition sparks creativity. So I think keep it basic. If you're just starting out, you just like writing stuff down might be a big first step for somebody. But for me, what I recommend with my students and what I would recommend with anyone who asks is figure out the little components that are important to you, probably some kind of long tones, some kind of flexibility, some kind of articulation, some kind of key signatures, scales, patterns, what have you, um, and just come up with a 5 minute thing, maybe a 5 or 10 minute thing to work on that. If you don't know what to do, you can either Google it, you can refer to maybe some lessons you've taken in the past, you can ask professionals. There's all sorts of ways to get
yeah.
very basic stuff, right? Clark 2 is an amazing exercise for anybody that wants to like get reasonable fingers, get reasonable efficiency here, breath control. Like there's all sorts of things you can do with Clark 2. So I mean, I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of that stuff's out there. Just come up with something and say, all right, let me do this workout every day for like 5 days and just do I feel like my playing is getting better? Most people will say yes. And then at some point, most people will reach a stage where they say, I feel like I'm not getting any riboflavin in my diet. and I can tell, like I can tell that there's something missing. So then you make a little revision and you say, okay, well, let me see if I can put that in there. I love it when my students get to the point where they're like, okay, well, if I do this and I do this and I do this, I don't have time to do this or this. And I'm like, yeah, so you come up with an A day and a B day, so you're getting it every other day. And they're like, oh. I don't have to do, yeah, I don't have to do everything every day. It's like, no, I mean, as long as you're covering the concepts regularly, maybe
Yeah,
arpeggios you do every third day, because on other days you're going to do lip slurs and on other days you're going to do, whatever. So, if there's this Marsteller exercise you really like to do, great, do it. But at some point you might say to yourself, I also want to do this other thing. So I'll do Marsteller on Monday and I'll do this other thing on Tuesday and then I'll do Marsteller on Wednesday. And
yeah,
next
it
thing you know,
makes sense.
the rotations just kind of organically start to happen. I think the tougher question is getting motivated to get in the room every day so that the groundwork is laid out. Because I think it's really hard to come up with a highly effective regiment and Excel spreadsheet or practice log. And, I think it's highly challenging to come up with an effective plan, and then you only do it 2 days this week, and then next week you get it 3 days, but then the following week you only get it once. Like you're not
That's the
getting the
biggest danger. Yeah,
consistency, so I
yeah.
think so whatever practice plan you can come up with that makes you want to get back into the room and do it and check it off the list. So keep it simple,
Mm,
25 minutes. Like you just got to get back to that room. And once you've established the habit of getting back to the room, you can then start maybe expanding or opening it up or getting creative. And you wait until your body tells you that you want to do that.
yeah.
I don't think there should be this charge toward complexity. I think the charge should be toward simplicity. Complexity is something that just happens if you do it long enough.
The other thing, yeah, that's beautifully said. Number one, biggest takeaway is make sure you have the motivation in place to show up for the practice, because you could have the best plan in the world, but not executing on it
Yeah.
is a total
It,
failure.
yeah.
And you could have just a decent plan and execute on it like a beast, and you're bound to make progress and learn. What I want to add to this is, one, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Just like you said, just get a plan, do it, iterate on it. And the second is having rhythms of reflection and iteration. So it sounds like this is broken into your practice already, but if you set something, say I'm going to do it for a week versus I'm going to play long tones for the rest of my life, it can be a little bit intense, right? My New Year's resolution, I'm going to do long tones every day this year. That it's a little much. If you say I'm going to do long tones every day this week, and on Sunday at the end of the week, I'm going to spend 10 minutes reflecting on how it went and create a new commitment for the next week. And
Hmm.
I'm going to do that for the entire month. And at the end of the month, I'm going to do a reflection on how the whole month went and plan my next month. And at the end of the year, I'm going to see how my year went and plan my next year and have these nested, iterative reflection and planning periods. I think that's the way to get to the level of mastery that you've achieved.
Yeah, reflection is crucial. And some people have to schedule reflection, plan it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just
Mm-hmm.
naturally will start to reflect as they've done something for a week or 3 days or
Yeah,
whatever.
totally.
And I think that for me, it feels like an organic, natural thing at this point. I think there's a
I
kind of
see.
a constant cycle of reflection because I'm so committed to the practice and I'm so committed to the units that I do. I mean, it seems like it just comes hand in hand with the whole, at some point, I'm going to reflect on how that's working or not working. Because if it's not working, then I don't want to keep investing time into it. So if I've
Right.
made the commitment to invest time to practice, I want it to be effective use of my time. I want it to be really efficient.
Well,
And
heck
and
yes. Thank you for sharing all of this. It's
yeah,
been super helpful. I know people can find you at jasonsullivan.com. Do you help folks to build their practice routines if they want to reach you there?
I can.
Yeah.
I primarily do it with my own students, although with some of my stability clients, I have done a little bit of it on the side. I'm more of like a guy with a trench coat that has practice plans in the trench coat, as opposed to I have like a whole storefront of product. But if there are people that watch this and say, "Wow, this could really help me," I'd be happy to like email back and forth, maybe hop on a Zoom call, whatever. I'm happy to help people if they're really interested in doing this. I don't ever think I'm going to make money off of practice planning for people, but if people would like to just chew on some things back and forth, I'd be happy to look at what they're doing, make some suggestions. Sure, anything that can help.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you again. That's super, a lot for me to marinate on, and for anybody who watches as well. I hope they get a lot from this.
Well, thanks. I know I tend to data dump because I get excited about it, but hopefully people can chew on the video and gain some help.